Oh, preparing. Oh, now we're live. This meeting is being live streamed, baby. Right, you lot talk amongst yourself. Well, I just sort the comments bit out on Facebook, right?
Oh, all right. All right. Loving the kitchen, Tracy.
What you eating?
Salt and pepper chicken with sweet chili sauce on a sandwich and chips with mayonnaise.
Nice.
Yes.
Oh, here we
It's
go.
hot.
Mr. Harris is on his way in too.
Awesome.
Oh, Feathers dropped off.
Feathers has dropped
He's
off. I
driving.
think he's dropping off and on because he's driving.
He's off.
Going through a tunnel.
Paul!
Hello, Mr. Harris. You will notice we have an extra bonus guest here in the form of Jill. I'm going to tell everybody who Jill is shortly.
Just excuse me a second. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Don't go.
This is so beautifully slick and organised tonight, isn't it? I love it. I love the rustic feel that we generate.
So we're going for that rustic.
So, ladies, gentlemen, and people, see how I did there. We are now live in the Rebels and Rule Breakers Facebook group doing our Master Rebel Rendezvous for August. And we've rung the changes a little bit this month because we opened it up to a potential guest. And our guest this time is Jill, the lovely Jill. And I'm going to introduce you to her shortly. We also have Mr. Paul Harris, who apparently is invisible right now. There he is.
There he is.
I'm coming in. Won't be a minute.
And Paul is who's got the police after them in the background.
Okay.
Paul is our newest Master Rebel, and has not joined us on a Master Rebel Rendezvous yet. I don't think, have you, Paul?
I lose track of which calls I've been on and which ones I
Paul
haven't.
is so confused. He's got no idea what's going on. But we'll wing it anyway. So first things first, let's talk about you, Jill. So I know Jill from something called EMF. What were we on? 9?
Yeah.
You were EMF 7 as well, weren't you? I think. Yeah. So this is so those of you who watched the interview that Kay Irvin and I did a couple of months ago, you'll have heard us talking about EMF. So this is a program that Peter Sage runs, who is from the Tony Robbins School of Thought. And Jill and I were on the same cohort together. And she's been a really good contributor to the Rebels and Rule Breakers group ever since. I'm very glad that she put a name forward. Now, tell us a bit about yourself, Jill, because you're not in the UK, are you?
Not in the UK. I am in the French Alps at the moment.
Swap.
Yeah.
What with Coventry? I'm sure Jill would jump at that chance.
I've got so many friends in that area. I would love to do a house swap at some point. I'm really happy to do that.
You heard it here, MK. You heard it here.
I'm back in. See you in a bit.
No, that would be fabulous. So we moved out here about 17, 18 years ago, having already worked out here for about 5 years. And the kids were brought up here, so they're bilingual. And they're very sporty as well, because when you're in the mountains, you get lots of mountain activities. So I think they're going to thank us for that one day. But right now, I think they've begun to understand how useful it is to be bilingual. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I bet. And you have a chalet, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, when we set up a company called Snowbeds, because we were both in the ski industry and we wanted to work in the ski industry and we wanted to stay in the ski industry. So we set up a company called Snowbeds and decided that it was pointless doing it out of Eastbourne, which is where we were, if we wanted to ski. So we needed to find somewhere that we could be close to an airport, but be in France. And this is before we knew anything about French administration. If anyone knows anything about France, red tape is abundant. I mean, we talk a lot about abundance in EMF, Believe me.
Not that
tape.
kind.
No, red tape is abundant in France. And I recall my other half saying, okay, well, if we're going to do this, then we need to find out everything that we need to do about moving to France. Me being the French speaker and him not. And I just said, no way. We're not going to do that. If we do that, we're not going to go. We're just going to go and we'll deal with the hoops once we get there. And I think I think we still haven't dealt with every hoop, sort of 17 years on. We're still learning stuff. We just set up a chalet without registering for any business or anything, but said if we can find a chalet to rent, then we'll just take the business out there, because these days, as everyone's finding out, you could work from the moon as long as you've got a telephone line and an internet connection. And that was our thought at the time. So that's what we did. And in fact, where we live in Lake Roder-Ash, it found us. Wow. Actually, I've just realised it looks like I am on the moon, of course. I forgot about the background. So it's a little mountain village called Lake Roder-Ash. It's a ski station which hasn't been operating as a ski station like the rest of France since March a year ago, for obvious reasons. They won't let people into telecabines or even onto chairlifts in the open air. You're not even allowed. Yeah, the whole thing is, but it does mean that there's been a lot of ski touring, which is split boarding, and both my husband and my daughter have done a lot of that this winter, so it's not really taken my fancy.
Right. Well, tell you what, right, what I'm going to do now is drop in the comments your website address for anyone who fancies looking at that, because I know you do all sorts of brilliant things, don't you, with people when they're over there. So when things do get moving and doing, people can move about more, it might be quite good for them to have that reference. What's the website address? It's
snowbeds.com.
Snowbeds.com. So cool.
We thought about a summer offering of sunbeds, but that didn't work. And then we thought about a coastline offering of seabeds, but that didn't work either. It just go completely the wrong connotation. But snowbeds basically, is concentrating on the French Alps.
That's brilliant. Well, it's so good to have you here, Jill. Thank you so much for coming and taking part in this madness.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what we're going to talk about today, I actually would like to talk about something that we talked a fair bit about, and perhaps a starter for 10. We talked a fair bit about in our last Rebel Yell coaching call, which I think would be a good starting point to get Jill's perspective on. So one of the particular themes that Mr. Harris actually brought to that discussion was the concept of owning your own shit. In order,
that's title.
in order to, so I suppose what I got from it is that if we all make mistakes, said the Dalek climbing off the dustbin. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we get into this defensive position where we sort of try and talk ourselves out of it or whatever, or we look back on ways that we used to be and impacts that we used to have on people and hold on to the guilt of that sometimes. And that actually, if we can sit still and kind of take responsibility for the things that we do, that in itself can be quite a rebellious act, because it has a ripple effect. So, Paul, give us a little synopsis or a little bit of a starter for the kind of stuff that we talked about in that area the other day.
I think we were. I mean, I can't remember the context now, but I was just saying how a rebellious act is not always to blame everybody else for your shit. Is that we're all at some point responsible for part of what's going on the planet right now. Even when you look at, I think the context was when you look at something like Afghanistan, if the Western governments put their hands up and said, "Yeah, we've probably caused part of the problem that's going on here," what difference would that make? How rebellious would that be for a politician to actually hold their hands up and say, "Yep, we've screwed up really. Now, it's not going to happen because that doesn't work politically. I get that. But in our personal lives, you know, we may have hurt somebody, we may have made a bad decision. And I know, again, the context was often, we don't like it when someone tells us something that we know is true, but we don't want to admit it. It's true. You know, I've had lots of conversations with my wife over the years where she'll tell me something and I absolutely know she's right, but I don't want to admit it particularly, you know. And I think that the title of the book, and excuse the language, was this idea of this book was, if we owned our own shit, it stinks less. It stops stinking, you know. And I think, you know, there's a lot of things going on in the world that if people just took responsibility for their part in what's happened, the problem would go away much more quickly than just constantly pointing fingers. I had a friend around this afternoon, actually. This subject came up again with my friend. I'm not wishing to open this debate, but I was using the context of the anti-vaccinators that say, you know, pointing the fingers at those that are taking vaccines, and those that are taking vaccines pointing fingers at those that are not taking vaccines. And everyone's shouting at each other across the sort of the void. And actually, we all just need to own our own decisions, take responsibility for what we're doing, and whatever that, okay, we have to be aware of the impact that we can have on other people and own that and own what that means rather than just constantly pointing fingers. So that's sort of sets the scene, really. So it's in where in our lives do we need to own our own shit? Because I think that is a rebellious act, because most people don't. They just want to blame somebody else for the stink.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, generally speaking, we're part of the stink as well. So let's just own our own part of that and see if we can put it right.
Yeah, massively agree with that. Thoughts, guys? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so one of the things, because I was part of the original conversation, and one of the things that you touched on, Paul, was when you're having a conversation with somebody. So if I'd been upset by somebody and I said, you upset me, straight away, as we do as humans, they immediately go on the defensive and kind of try to flick it back as if I've done something wrong. I think we were talking about how my mum's very good at making it my fault, even if I've said to her, you've upset me about something. And you kind of said, you know, own your own shit. If you've upset somebody, yes, straight away you want to go on the defensive. But if you kind of own it and say, I really didn't mean to upset you, let's have a conversation about it, you've diffused the situation a lot quicker. And as well, you come out a lot better, really. I think you don't walk away with as much resentment because you've opened yourselves up to that conversation, you've listened to that person, and you've kind of acknowledged their feelings rather than dismissing it. And we all hate to be dismissed when it comes to our feelings, but yet we don't realise that we do it in return. So that was something really powerful that I took. And I mean, even over the weekend, me and my husband had a couple of tips, as you do with a 6-hour car journey and an 8-year-old. But we've kind of had a conversation where we've said, you know, if one of us upsets each other, we're quite happy to listen and have that conversation and not kind of play the blame game. And so even in the little things like that, it's already started to pay off.
I'll just give you one more example. Before I'm going to nip out a couple of times to put stuff in the oven and stuff for our tea. So I'll be back. So if I disappear, I am coming back. I'm just nipping downstairs to the oven. But one of the contexts I gave to my friend today was that as a parent sometimes, well, not as a parent sometimes, as a parent lots of times we screw up. We don't say the right things to our kids. We're not in a good place. I don't mind sharing this openly that, you know, when I had a real tough time in my life, I wasn't present. I don't mean physically present. I wasn't emotionally present. I don't think as much as I could have been as a dad to my son. And he's been going through some sort of therapy about anxiety and stuff. And this came up actually for him, that for part of his life, I wasn't around. And part of his therapy was to come and talk to me about it. Now, I could quite easily have said, James, you've got no idea what was going on at that stage of my life. You know, this was going on, that was going on. How could I be there for you? Which is partly what I would have wanted to say. But what I actually said was, James, you're absolutely right. I wasn't present. I wasn't emotionally present. And the healing, the rapid healing in that conversation, because I just owned my shit. I owned the fact that there was lots of stuff going on. There was lots of excuses I could have given for why I was like I was. But the fact that it impacted on somebody else, I own that. And it just is a very therapeutic and cathartic process when we just don't try and defend ourselves when we know actually we probably were in the wrong at that time, rather than the natural human reaction of, but you don't understand what pressure I was under, how much stress I was under.
And you made me do that. I was only like that because of that. Yeah.
If you'd just been calmer, I wouldn't have reacted like I was. If you just hadn't said that, I wouldn't have said that. And it's like, whoa, just take it down a couple of notches. Yeah. Let's all own our bit of this process. And, I just think globally right now, we need that vibe.
Oh, we so do.
Leaders to own our part of what's going wrong and try and put it right, rather than just pointing fingers at everybody else.
Jill, what's your take on this? Because I particularly like what Paul said there about rapid healing. And I think, this is, for EMFers, this will certainly resonate, won't it? Because it makes me think of the whole event perspective shift thing, where you look at something almost objectively and not as a victim of things and all of that stuff.
Exactly.
What's your take on this?
Thank you. It's a really interesting subject, and thank you very much to give me an opportunity to say something about it. What Tracy was saying earlier, if I could just go back to that.
Yeah.
She was talking about how other people make us feel, or how we can make other people feel. And we should own that we've got a responsibility for that. I tend to look at it a slightly different way. I think if we have told somebody that they upset us, that means we've actually given away our power. That we're telling them they've got power to press our buttons. So my other half will say, oh, it makes me so angry when you do this or when you do that. And I find it quite interesting, because as soon as he says that, I now know what to do if I want to make him angry. So he's given me his power. So if instead we realize that we have responsibility for our own feelings, and that if somebody does something that triggers us, that we can decide how we're going to react. Now, if somebody came up to us and punched us in the face, we got a choice. We can punch them back or kick them in the balls or whatever it is. Or we could take a step back and just say, what'd you do that for? Or we could just walk away. We don't have to retaliate, and we don't have to defend ourselves. There'll be a reason that they did it, and they'll have probably a good reason for doing it, but it won't necessarily have been anything that we did. It will be something that we did that reminded them of a time when they were upset previously, and it's triggered them into having a go. So that was the first thing, Tracy. So it's really interesting. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because for me, it's quite important. Neither my other half nor my daughter get my way of thinking on this. They still think that I have the power to control their feelings. But interestingly, my father, who's hard of hearing and quite blind, was accused by my sister of bullying my mother. And he wasn't feeling heard, so he had raised his voice, and both my sister and my mother accused him of bullying them. And when he spoke to me about it, he said, I wasn't bullying them. I said, what were you doing? He said, I was trying to get myself heard. So they felt bullied is completely different to him bullying them.
Yeah.
So that takes us to one further little step, which is, although we can take responsibility for our own feelings, we need to be aware of the reaction that other people can have, for example, as I spoke to him about it, I said, are you aware, Dad, that when you raise your voice, both Mum and Jan feel bullied? And he went, no. I said, well, if you're aware of it, then you're less likely to do it, which is less likely to trigger them. So instead of trying to get them to take responsibility for their own feelings, just be aware of the power that you have and use it, and be aware of it and use it very carefully. And just finally, if I may, Paul, you talked about screwing up the kids. My sister came out with something very profound once, and she said, look, let's face it, we're parents, and all parents screw their kids up as far as the kids are concerned. Our job is to give the kids the tools they need to unscrew themselves later on in life.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I take my hat off to her.
That's
Love
so
that.
beautiful. I love that whole, sort of, if you can communicate to somebody something that raises their awareness of an impact, I think that's, if you can do that almost unemotionally, that is probably more powerful than saying you've really hurt me. And I think when you do it, I understand what you mean about giving your power away, because I think if somebody tells you something that affects them emotionally, then it hands a responsibility also to you, doesn't it, to do the right or wrong thing with that information.
But there is a really strong way of dealing with that. So if you're feeling hurt, own your shit, as Paul says, and say how you're feeling. Don't blame them for you feeling hurt. Say, I feel hurt. I feel very hurt when somebody says what you've just said to me. It makes me feel really hurt. Because as soon as you start a sentence with the word you, it implies blame.
You did
so
that.
You hurt me.
Yeah.
When they had no intention. And that's what sets that pendulum, that backward forward, that no, I didn't, that I must defend myself. Yeah.
Nadia is saying, nobody can make us feel anything, right? It's up to us. And that we're trying to unscrew ourselves every day, which is, we're all in that, we're all that work in progress, aren't we? We're never finished. That's part of the whole journey.
It's the action and emotion that goes with it. So like, it's the wording of, I feel this way because, rather than you've made me feel this way because it regardless of who it is, you're still going to feel like that. It's just signposting that person to that action makes me feel this way, so please don't do it. But then I also, obviously, I'm on the bit of the flip in terms of there's always that line in terms of being authentically you and kind of changing who you are because of how you are as a person makes someone feel. There's a difference between your actions and just who you are, and being able to own that. Like, there are always going to be someone there is always going to be someone that just doesn't go with your way of thinking or whatever it is, or how you portray the world. But it's not taking them on a journey that makes them feel bad without giving up who you are. And they have to own that as well, that not everyone's going to be in their way of thinking, while you're owning your shit of, actually, maybe if I tweak this a little bit, I probably won't do as much environmental damage to people on the outside as well.
I've actually tried that with my husband, and said to him, when you use the word you at the beginning of a sentence, it makes me feel like you're hammering him on the head with a hammer. You, and it's like you this and you that and you the other. Doesn't matter how gently he says it, that's the way I take it. So I actually said to him, when you start a sentence with the word you, it makes me feel this way. Do you know what he does? He avoids it until he really wants me to take notice of something. And then he goes, you this, you that. So I've given away my power again by even telling him that. So it's so much more powerful to say, I feel this way when that happens, or I feel this way when these things occur, or I feel this way.
It's interesting. Go on.
I was just going to say, the shift actually that I'm noticing with that is, it's this classic, for those of you familiar with transactional analysis, that you have made me do that thing. It's quite a parent-child response. If you then actually change into an adult frame of mind and say, okay, when this happens, this is the impact it has on me, and this is why it might trigger me because of X, Y, and Z. Because you're communicating clearly and maturely, it then allows the other person to do that as well. It invites them to step into that position. However, what we have to be able to do is let go of whether they make that choice or not.
Yeah, it's knowing when to kind of give up or kind of help the person, because some people are always going to feel, and I hate to say it, the victim, regardless of the scenario. And say, like, if I'm giving feedback at work and someone's like bitey, the first thing I ask is, like, what is making you react like that? Because normally, 9 times out of 10, it's not their normal reaction. And normally it's an outside factor. Sometimes you can have that conversation and that they're just stuck in that emotion, and regardless, they're not going to get out of it. And it's just knowing when to go, some things are worth fighting for, some things are not. This is one of those that you need to let go of.
And letting them ride it through, but
Yeah.
knowing that you're there in the background. So we've got a very similar situation at home at the moment. So, you know, Howard's mum passed away in February. It would have been her 60th birthday next week. Now, Howard and I are very practical people. We will think about her, and but we've got very busy lives, and we do our things where Howard's sister has messaged and said, right, who's doing this for mum's birthday? And we were like doing things our own way. To which then I received, because I'm the softer person in the relationship, received the message of, I don't feel like anybody cares. I don't feel like anybody wants to celebrate. Now, I could have gone down the path which I've falsely done incorrectly before of, it's okay, you get out those emotions. But what I did was, that's great that you're doing that. However, Howard's a different person. We are different people. This is how we're doing it. If you need us, we are here. But you are allowed to grieve however you want to grieve, but it doesn't make other people a bad person, because it's that perception of you two are bad people because you're not doing it my way. And it's like, no, there's a way. And it's knowing, so I've kind of done that. I'm stepping back. I'm here. I will love you. I will care for you, but I can't continually stroke that grief within you because it feels wrong.
And you've got to support your own husband in his version of that as well.
Absolutely. So it's knowing when to sidestep as well, but like I say, in that adult space, but leaving them that little bit of a covering of a blanket to say, I'm still holding the corner of that blanket. You pull on it.
And sometimes actually that's the better thing to do for somebody, because I always think it's a bit like scaffolding, or raising. I know it sounds silly, but like raising a chick, you know. When a chick first hatches, you have to nurture it, feed it, you know, all of that. Not that I've ever had chicks, but you know, if that mother bird, you know, kept doing that for its entire life, it would never leave the nest. And sometimes you have to give people enough that they can then almost take the baton and you know, make their own decisions on taking that responsibility. But if you continually give people everything they need and spoon feed them and emotionally feed them, then they never become self-sufficient.
And it's
like people get that
it's that whole piece for me, and we've talked about it before, that self-care and that self-love for me is intrinsically linked to owning your shit. You cannot love our self-care without owning your shit, without doing this belongs to me. And when we talk about ownership, we've all gone on if you've hurt somebody or somebody's hurt you, but there's also the positivity of owning your own shit for me, getting up each day and going, or ending each day and going, look how bloody achieved. Look at what I've done. It's doing that.
Celebrating your own shit.
Celebrating your own shit. Exactly. Because it smells wonderful. But it's that whole thing of, do you know what? Crappiness. I've had a couple of things this week that have been completely rubbish. I could have very easily got my pajamas on, laid in my bed and thought, I don't want to adult. I really don't want to do this because it's been really rubbish. But then that shit owns me. Yeah. Whereas I've gone, actually, no, that's rubbish. Can I change it or control it? No, I can't. But what I can control and change is this and this in here. So I'm going to positively own that shit.
Tracy, you've been on a self-love journey as well, haven't you? Celebrating your own loveliness. Getting there.
Last year, lockdown threw me into an unusual situation. So I made the most of it. An hour every evening. I have time out for myself. I do vary it these days. It used to be that I'd do my skincare and that was the only hour that I'd have. Whereas now what I do is when Jacob's gone to bed or if he's staying at my parents', I might read for an hour. The Happy newspaper is one of my go-tos.
Nice.
But I always have that hour dedicated just to me. No TV, no phone calls, no internet, no social media. Something that is just about making me feel better. So quite often it'll be a skincare, or I might sit and put a skin mask on and then, you know, wash it off. Or sometimes I might just lie and listen to music for an hour just to chill out. Whatever it is, something that's just for me, so that I can sort of recenter. And a lot of people found that lockdown was a struggle for them. My personal journey through lockdown was, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Mental health wise, I don't get anywhere near as stressed. I know that I need
Hi,
to
Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob, you're live in the world.
Loads of people watching. But yeah, it's made me a better mum, it's made me a better wife, it's made me a better person. Yeah, I've just really enjoyed it, and it's something that I've totally embraced. And even now life's kind of getting a little bit more back to normal, I'm still carrying it on. I'm still enjoying that hour just for me.
Yeah. Well, how good are you at the self-love, Jill? That sounds a bit dodgy as a question, but you know, we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Self-love. I'm very impressed with Tracy, having done that and kept it going as well, despite the fact I'm guessing you live with a partner and you've got a child too. How good am I? It's trickier. I don't know about you guys. You know each other quite well. I grew up as a people pleaser, so I have always been at people's beck and call, even allowing the kids for me to be at their beck and call, because you give what you didn't get, don't you?
Yeah.
When you're a mum, you give what you didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
And you quite often go too far the other way. So finding the balance after that has been quite tricky. But since doing the course, Emma, that you did, that we both have done, I have got much, much better at
Really good.
making my boundaries clear, sticking to them, and also doing what I need for me. And that empowered me to that degree. I'm not quite as regular as Tracy is at doing what she's doing, and I probably take a bit more time, but not on a regular basis, a bit less regular. But I'm well impressed, Tracy.
It's good,
Take
isn't
my hat
it?
off to you. Yeah.
She's really good at that.
It's totally inspired me. It really has. Now, what I loved about it is because sometimes we think we do downtime because we watch TV or we scroll through his phone and it's not. And that's just hit me then. Actually, I need that quiet downtime, whether it's a face mask or anything. So from tonight.
MK likes to romance themselves with the bath, don't you?
In the dark.
We talked about this many times.
It's the only... do you know what? Obviously, so anyone who knows what my head's like, I don't stop. So I would literally have telly on, iPad, whatever. Even in the bath when I'm romancing myself, there is something on. Now, this is something that I find really hard to do, but I think with the walking, it's really helped me just be able to put my phone down. So when I was in Skeggy for my birthday, even though I had my phone on the beach, I spent the majority of the time in the sea while everyone else was sunbathing. So I didn't have my phone. I didn't have anyone with me. I was literally just walking as far out as I could get.
Wow.
And just taking it all in. Spent most of the time counting the little windmills out at sea. But to me, that was my kind of quiet time now, just being able to walk and disconnect. But I will always find it hard just because of the way my head's wired. But I think the walk in has definitely encouraged me to kind of try and do that.
How do you count the steps when you're in the sea? Do you count them?
Good point.
No, I didn't count any steps. I lost out on a lot of steps in Skegness purely because of that. But yeah, I wasn't going to take my phone in the sea.
Need a gadget.
I did have one and my strap broke literally the week before, so I was fuming because I would have just wore that because it's waterproof.
You know, I've like tied something to like a vest top or something. That works too.
I don't wear a lot of clothes.
Like a nurse.
Ever. Yeah, no. But that's Paul, my disconnect. So yeah.
Paul, what about you and self-love and people please and all? Again, that sounds well dodgy, but I'm going to breeze past it.
How do you people please through your self-love?
Self-love. So in the
Tracy's got the
I know you're asking the question rather than a smutty version. And there's something else I want to say about the conversation. I know I've been dipping in and out, but come back to something in a second. I'm not very good at it, if I'm honest. I'm definitely a people pleaser, always have been. And probably not selfish enough at times, but I can't, there are things, I'm sure if Sam came in, she'd tell me there's things that I do sort of for myself. But I was listening to what Tracy was saying about, taking time in the evening and stuff. I did take up painting by numbers as something that would just get my mind off work. And I quite enjoy that. I enjoy a bath sometimes in an evening, or a bath if you're posh. But I'm not very good at
bath.
The bath have more rose petals.
The bath.
Yeah, definitely a bath. So I'm not very good at it would be the answer. And I think I can see Lisa's just said in the chat, crikey, what an amazing thing to do. And I think I'm not very good at sitting still. So, things like meditation and those sort of things are quite difficult. I tend to be busy all the time or doing something, which is not good particularly. But I've got to go shortly, but I wanted to just bring up another, and you've covered this, forgive me, but this whole owning your own shit thing that we were talking about at the beginning of the call, I think as well as owning our own shit, we need to let go of some of our own shit as well. So as well as taking responsibility for things that we've done, I was thinking when you were all talking and then what Jill was saying, that there's times actually we just need to let go of some of the stuff that we've done as well, because if we do continue to own it, it doesn't help us, it can hinder us. So I was just conscious of putting the message out there about owning your own stuff. There's also, because every life to me is just two sides of the same coin all the time. So the flip side of that, the flip side of owning it is knowing when to let go of it.
Yeah.
As well. So just making sure we've got the message out there if people are watching, that it's not, if you've done something wrong, it's not just then, beating yourself up for the rest of your life that you've done something.
Yeah, really good point.
Can I just say something to Paul before he goes? Sorry, because I see he's going to go. I just want to say well done for being such a perfect example to your son when he came and was saying to you about the fact that you weren't there emotionally for him. Just to listen to him and agree with him sets such a brilliant example to him in being authentic and understanding and not doing what we all do by default, which is try to defend ourselves because we think we're about to get into trouble for something. That was so powerful, and I meant to say something earlier and I didn't.
Bless you, Jill. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
It's so true, and I think there's power in silence, and I think that's the message I get from that. That if you allow somebody the space to talk and say how they feel about something, and listen and hear, and just let that communication flow through without trying to take action in that space, I think that's a really powerful thing, isn't it?
And I think you've all heard the phrase, walk a mile in somebody's shoes before you judge them. And I think, in that particular instance, Jill, I put myself in his shoes. I could have stayed in my shoes and said, yes, but there's all this stuff that was going on, you don't know about it. But I just changed the perspective. I try and do that a lot. That's what I'm sort of almost saying about this owning our own stuff, is when we sit in the perspective of the person that's listening to us or experiencing something, that's very powerful. So all I did, that's why I was able to say, yes, James, you're right, because I was looking at it through his eyes, not through mine.
Yeah. I don't know how old he is, but it must have taken him some guts to try and get that conversation with you.
Yeah, well, he's had some help, and part of his journey was, okay, the next stage now is to come and talk to your dad. And, and my son was there as well. And it was, there was other things we spoke about, but it was just in that instance, I didn't want to defend anything because I could have done, because I'm an adult and he was a child at the time. And there's lots of reasons why things were going on like they were. But from his perspective, I wasn't there. So I just said, look, let me own that. You're absolutely right. You don't need to carry that around anymore, because give it back to me. I'll own it. I was the adult at the time. Doesn't matter what the circumstances were. That's how you were feeling. And I validated it really. At the same time, there's then interestingly linking in with the letting go. But I also said, and because James said, well, I don't want you to feel guilty, Dad. I said, I don't feel guilty, because that's not going to help me either. That's the letting go bit. I could feel guilty. I could, beat myself up about it. But the letting go piece, once you've owned it, is then let it go, because it doesn't serve you to feel guilty. It's more about now and being present now than it was, I can't change the past. No one can change. That's
that rapid healing thing that that phrase I just thought was a great thing. It's amazing the speed at which you can heal if you just seek to understand before trying to be understood. And it could take some people years of therapy just trying to get to that, but actually in that moment there's so much you can do to
just one other thing. People often get this confused with when we seek to understand somebody, that we aren't necessarily condoning it. If you think about I can't remember, massive the Northern Ireland crisis, when that was almost resolved by not necessarily condoning, absolutely definitely not condoning the actions on either side, but it was just sitting down and trying to hear what other people are saying. And that requires bravery and that's what's not happening in the world at the moment. People are not stepping in to the scary places and owning our responsibility towards it. And therefore, that's why the healing doesn't happen. Whereas if we just stepped into that space and said, okay, I'm going to own my piece of this. We're not going to defend each other against what the reasons and why fors. And we can then quickly move to, well, how do we make it better now? How do we move forward and make it better? Whereas if we spend all the time, trying to find excuses and point fingers and blame,
analysing all the things that everybody did. It
doesn't get us anywhere. So to me, the new energy that's coming in, it needs to move us through healing much more quickly. And it's lack of blame, lack of judgment. It's not condoning. It's not necessarily even, accepting someone's behaviour was acceptable, but it's about forgiveness and all these sorts of big stuff that is potentially, that's where the rapid healing comes from. Well, thank you for listening to my dribble.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Yes. That's Paul Harris. Good evening. Yes.
Do you know what? You need to be on a TED Talk stage for sure.
And Jill, no, I haven't read David Hawkins' work. I haven't.
You'd love it.
Yeah. Really I mean, I've heard bits of it and seen bits of it, but I haven't read David Hawkins' work now.
Before you go, Paul, I need to tell you, I was in Skegness with someone who is aware of who you are and your book, and has a copy of it.
Sorry, she has a copy of my book, did you say?
Have you got a copy of your book to flash to us to hand?
I have.
Shit.
I took it to Skeggy with me with all purpose of reading it, and then ended up very, very bruised and battered.
Oh, the man with the scarlet socks.
Man with the scarlet socks. If you haven't got a copy of this, folks, you need it, because it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Really is. And Paul's working on a new one.
Yeah. And I was talking to someone today about one of the first things we talk about in Manuscript. Well, not the first thing that comes across. One of the messages in it is finding the silence. Yeah. The first step to hearing from higher sources is just shut up.
Yeah.
Find the silence. Just find some space in between your thoughts, and it's again linked to what we've just been saying. If we just were silent at times in arguments, rather than feeling we need to speak. Maybe that rapid healing will come again.
Well, I'm going to take that as a prompt for our final thoughts to wrap up tonight, and I'm going to go round you one by one. We'll say that's your final thought, Paul. Can we buy it directly from Paul? Yes, you can. So let's do a sort of wrap up then. So Jill is our guest, and I will invite you in to give us your final thoughts on this topic, a bit Jerry Springer style.
Can I come at the end?
Yes, go on then. Who would like to do their final thoughts first?
So I've got two. The first one is really excited tonight to start my self-love. That sounds really dodgy, but to be held accountable for it and to just do something that's quieter than the TV on and the phone. The second one, and this is driven by the wonderful Mr. Paul Harris. Let it go, let it go. There you go.
I love that. Frozen. It's gorgeous. Maybe we should sing everybody out, or not.
Into the unknown.
Into the unknown.
MK, what would your final thoughts be?
Going back to the whole forgiveness thing, I think my final thought would be that forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for you, and it massively helps. As someone who has dealt with a lot of childhood trauma, I think one of the things I've got to the point of is not blaming everyone else and then internally blaming myself. If I can just not even understand and condone it, just go, do you know what? I forgive you. That's it. it's helped me grow. So that's probably my message to everyone, is the forgiveness is a part of the process for you and no one else.
Yeah, I love that. Tracy, my love.
I think mine would be just around the silence. I think one of the things that I always struggled with growing up was being heard. And I think as an adult now, I recognise that you need to allow somebody that opportunity. It's not just about hearing the voice come out of their mouth. It's about actually hearing the words that they're saying to you and understanding what it is that they want you to hear. I think that, as Paul said, during an argument, it's very easy just to throw at each other. Whereas if you take a step back and actually hear what it is that that person is saying, it changes the complete dynamics of the conversation. And I think that it isn't just when you've got confrontation or you've got, issues of hurt. I think it's in all aspects of conversation at work, hearing what somebody is telling you, acknowledging it, using it if you need to, but just hearing the words that that person is saying and understand the message. I think that's really important, and I think we all can do better around the world, everywhere.
This is the key to stopping wars.
Yes.
Jill. Thank you, Trace. That was lovely.
It was lovely. And just following on from that, I think patience is the key to being heard. I think when everybody wants to be heard, instead of fighting to be heard first, if you're able to listen to them and stay patient and concentrated, eventually your turn will come, because no one has anything left to say. And all they have got is the space to listen to what you've got to say. So I think patience is the key to being heard.
Do you know, that's wonderful, because it links into something I was thinking as well, that hearing somebody, it's not just leaving a space and waiting till they finish talking so you can talk. It's actually being present in that moment and hearing, isn't it? And my final thought would be linked to what MK was saying, that, if you don't forgive people, then you're effectively, it's like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. I think a similar thing actually about forgiving yourself for things sometimes. And if forgiving yourself in a way that, similar to the example that Paul's given us about him and his son, there comes a time where you have to sort of release yourself from that. If you feel you've done what you needed to do with it and taken full responsibility, you sort of have to forgive yourself a little bit. And that doesn't always mean that the other person will forgive you. But if you're held hostage by that your entire life because someone else doesn't forgive you, then there are lots of people in pain, potentially unnecessarily. So that would be my final thought. And I want to say a massive thank you to all of you, particularly Jill, for being our guest master today. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
It's been really fun. I'm going to take us offline then. So Rebels and Rule Breakers, if you're watching this on replay, please let us know. And if you have any questions for us at any point, or you have a topic you'd like us to talk about next time, then just shout up and we will take note. We love you all. Keep rebelling. Chief Rebel and Master Rebels out.